You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Susie, Boniface, Daily Mirror columnist, and Freddy Gray, deputy editor of the Spectator magazine. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The Telegraph says the government's scientific advisers have said a fourth coronavirus vaccine dose will not be necessary. There's been a rush by the double-jabbed to book holidays abroad. That's on the front of the Mirror. The Chancellor is being urged to revisit the suspension of the triple lock in order to help vulnerable pensioners. That's according to the Financial Times. The Express reckons we're collectively sitting on a savings pot of £1.7 trillion built up during the pandemic, with many of us torn between splashing the cash or keeping it for rising energy bills. The new head of the Armed Forces, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, has told The Times he is concerned over Russia's underwater activity, particularly around crucial communication cables under the sea. The Attorney General, Suella Braverman MP, has been accused of politically motivating meddling after she said she could refer the acquittal of 4 Black Lives Matter protesters who toppled a statue of Edward Colston to the Court of Appeal. The Sun reports that singer and actress Denise Van Outen has broken up with her fiancé after he cheated on her. And The Star leads on television's Eamon Holmes' hopes for curing his back pain. We're joined tonight by Susie, Boniface and Freddy Gray. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with the Telegraph. And as we mentioned in that run-through of the newspapers, this is the story that the government scientific advisers are suggesting that a fourth jab will not be necessary, at least not for now, Susie.
Yes, and it's good news in a way because it does mean that the NHS can concentrate on getting the third booster jab out to people. And of course, in some cases, there will be fourth jabs for those who are immunosuppressed and need more than one injection of different doses as we go through. So what they're saying here is that actually you've got enough antibodies from the first booster, the third jab, if you have that should protect you. There are 1 or 2 other countries which are thinking about fourth jabs. Israel has been trialling it and rolling it out and says that there's a 5-fold increase in antibodies, but experts seem to be a bit divided as to whether or not it's useful. What this does mean, though, is that the NHS, like I said, can concentrate on the vaccines that we've got now. And then in the next year, we're going to be getting very specific vaccines, new ones that are designed totally for the new variants we've seen arise. And so we may need to be vaccinated again next year, but that'll be a whole fresh new vaccination. But of course, by then we'll have whole fresh new variants to worry about. So this is a bit of news in the sense that, you know, as that one of the experts is saying in here, we can't possibly vaccinate the whole world every 6 months. Not that we've vaccinated the whole world yet anyway. So this is a way of basically saying that, well, at least we can concentrate on what we're doing well and look forward to trying to do things a bit better in the future.
Yeah, seemingly good news. For the moment, the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisations are saying that a fourth jab would only provide limited additional benefit against severe disease at this present time. Freddie?
Well, I think it is good news, and I think there's also a little bit of nudge going on in that there's a theory within government that if we put the fourth booster off, more people will take the third booster. There's a certain amount of depression in people thinking they're just going to have to constantly take the fourth booster. But it is good news. And as Susie says, you know, the last thing the NHS needs now is a massive another booster rollout drive. So it's good news. And it also suggests that at the moment, and I don't want to sound sort of cocky here, but at the moment we're looking at possibly a good news cycle on COVID. I mean, there does seem to be a bit of a peaking happening after a very alarming crisis in the build up to Christmas. And I think people within government are starting to feel a little bit more confident about the next few weeks.
Yes, and certainly, Susie, all the evidence seems to be pointing to the fact that Omicron, at least, is certainly milder than Delta.
Milder, yes, but unfortunately, because it's infected so many more people, those who work in the NHS aren't particularly looking forward to the next few weeks because they're saying that's when what's already happened and what's already the infections that have been passed around over the festive period is that they've been baked in, and that's when it's really going to hit. We've already got dozens of NHS trusts declaring major incidents, sharing resources, and it looks likely that the next few weeks are going to be very sticky indeed if you happen to work in a hospital where there are an awful lot of staff vacancies, which are making it significantly worse.
Freddie, take us to the Times and this story, a warning about the threat from Russia. The Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, the new defence chief, has some quite serious concerns.
Well, yes, if you listen to the sort of foreign policy experts of the world, there's been a sort of drumbeat of concern about Russia, particularly over Ukraine and now over Kazakhstan in recent weeks. But I have said I do feel sometimes a little bit sceptical about these stories about hypersonic missiles, because you do feel they're a little bit briefed out by people with sort of intelligence interests who are always quite keen to sound as hostile as possible towards Russia and Putin. I'm not saying that Putin is not a dangerous menace to the free world. He is in many ways. But I think when it comes to talk about hypersonic missiles and things, sometimes these stories can get a little bit overblown.
Susie, the Admiral's particularly concerned about crucial underwater communication cables being tampered with by Moscow. And if that were to happen, he suggests that that would be considered as an act of war.
Yep, those are the undersea cables that carry most of our internet and our data all around the world, a lot of them in the Atlantic where there's been more Russian activity. And while the Russian Navy is extremely ancient, creaky and rusty, run by conscripts, it is able to actually intercept those cables and cause severe disruption. He's saying that would be an act of war. And what's interesting here is that the line that Freddie mentions in the second column about Tony Radakin saying we're going to need to develop hypersonic missiles. Now, those are missiles that are so fast, they travel a mile a second. They're so fast that by the time they've blown you up, you still haven't seen them. You know, by the time you've noticed them, you've been obliterated. That's it, you're gone. And there is no defense system in the world that can protect anybody against a hypersonic missile. Now, they're being developed by the US, by Russia, by China. And he's saying here that we are going to have our own. What's interesting about this is that we started on a concept with the French back in 2011, which was stepped up in 2016 for a joint Anglo-French hypersonic missile called Perseus. And in last September 2021, we were going to be signing a memorandum of understanding with the French to push things forward so we could get that hypersonic missile and protect ourselves with it. Unfortunately, we then had a deal with Australia about submarines, which meant Australia dropped the French submarines, and therefore France delayed signing that memo of understanding. And it looks likely now that we wouldn't even get Perseus until the 2030s, maybe even later. Tony Radakin told Parliament this week we're going to have to try and find someone who wants to build that missile with us now. So we're in a situation where we really, really need one of these whizzing new missiles. Everybody else is getting one, and we could be in serious danger if we don't. But we've upset the only person that we were building it with. So we're now going to have to either find billions and billions and billions of pounds to build our own, or try and piggyback on someone else's design. It's all a bit sticky, really.
Freddie, take us into The Guardian, and this is the story of the Attorney General for England and Wales announcing that she could refer the acquittal of the Colston 4 to the Court of Appeal, and this has not been met too kindly by some.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of concern in the Conservative press and among Conservative MPs about this case. I mean, I think it does set a dangerous precedent when you say that destruction of public property is something that can be let off if it's considered that the cause is right. And I think that politicians are right to raise their concerns about it. And it's not necessarily meddling with the judicial system to say so, as the Guardian piece suggests.
Susie, your thoughts? Is it meddling?
Yes, because the jury system doesn't set a precedent in criminal law. Okay, so if a jury decides to acquit someone, whether they're guilty or innocent of what they've actually done, if the jury decides you haven't committed a crime here that's worth us convicting you for, that's what our jury system is for, and it's not up to politicians to question that. However, if what Suella Braverman does is to refer it to a higher court to look at it again, then that would actually set a criminal precedent which would affect future cases. So it might backfire on her spectacularly. And anybody who's concerned about statues being made to go for a swim might want to ask themselves how they felt about the statue of Saddam Hussein coming down in Baghdad and being hit by people's shoes, or statues of Lenin and Marx coming down after the fall of the Berlin Wall, or indeed the removal of swastikas after the Allies liberated Europe. We take down things that we don't want to glorify anymore, and no one ever wanted to glorify Edward Colston. Even when they put the statue up, nobody wanted to do it. So it seems fair enough to me that he took a dunk.
It doesn't say what Suella Braverman's point of law is that she's concerned about, so that's quite interesting. It'd be quite interesting to see how that pans out.
I'd just like to chip in and say I'm generally against taking down statues, even of people I find despicable.
Because?
Because I just think it's bad precedent. You know, if you don't like something that's a public monument, you shouldn't take it down. I mean, you can talk about Saddam Hussein, but that's in a war situation. I think that's slightly different.
What's your view on statues that you find the people despicable? What's your view on them being placed perhaps in a museum or somewhere else, but not being on public display? Is that an alternative?
Well, I mean, I've seen statues of Lenin. And I think Lenin was a fairly despicable figure in many ways. I've seen a statue of Stalin erected in someone's private garden, and I think that's despicable. But I wouldn't tear it down. I just don't really believe in doing that. I think it's a silly thing to do, and particularly with public property.
And this story about people feeling free to book holidays now because if they're double jabbed, it makes it a lot easier, Freddie.
Yes, I mean, I would say slightly watch out, because the possibility that booster jabs will be required on a vaccination pass in the future has not gone away. But again, I think, like the first story we discussed, I think this is a sign of good news. I think this is a sign of increasing optimism about the crisis. And again, let's not get complacent. But I think people are beginning to feel that we can have travel again in the future, and that's an encouraging sign.
But if we've learnt anything, it's a movable situation, isn't it? Nothing stays still for very long.
Well, it's been a terrible, terrible time. And I mean, I hope for the travel industry, finally we're through this, because I'm not sure it's going to be able to cope with another wave of cancelled holidays and refunds and so on.
Yeah. Susie, a huge spike in bookings is being reported. Jet2 Chief Executive Steve Heapy saying people are absolutely desperate to get away.
Of course, and if I was running a business that had been severely suffering in the last 2 years, as soon as I got some bookings, that's what I'd be saying too. But this is the busiest week of the year always for the travel industry, so this was always going to be the time. They should have had a bit of an uptick anyway. I'm sure the announcement about easing travel rules has made it easier, but we also don't know quite when these bookings are for, of course. One assumes that a lot of it's going to be over the summer, when we can all be a bit more experienced now about how the pandemic's working out. We can probably all assume that the summer's going to be better than the winter. So, that's not bad news. There is something a bit grim towards the end in the copy there, where Sajid Javid apparently warned the cabinet that if you keep off the travel restrictions and you encourage all these holiday makers, that massively increases the risk of importing a lovely fresh new variant to cause us problems next winter. So while I love to be as optimistic as Freddie and go, it's all marvellous, we're over this now, I think the possibility is that...
I did not say that. I didn't say we're over this.
No.
But I mean, I think the thing with variants, right, the thing with mutations, as far as we can tell, is you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Suppression of the virus leads to mutation. Spread of the virus leads to mutation. So I think it's a very perilous situation. I'm not being
it is
overly sanguine about that.